when we worked with Swami Rujananda, Rudy, after his classes, he would sit and talk, and we would still have within us the desire and the purpose of maintaining an openness. And that's what I do with Swamiji. I call Acharya Premananda Swamiji. And that's what I do with him. When he talks after class, I still maintain an opening, and I'm working inside to surrender. I think if someone does that, they can really get something important and valuable from that. In 1973, our guru, Swami Rujananda, died in a plane crash in upstate New York. And I was living at that time in one of his ashrams that he had established in the United States in Texas. And our teacher was with Rudy on the plane, and he survived and was recuperating in a hospital. Now you can imagine the chaos that people were feeling during this time, and it certainly was the case with me. And one day, I was a partner in the ashram contracting company that we had. I was driving my truck home, and I was feeling this extraordinary sadness. And it wasn't fear and it wasn't anxiety, but it was a deep questioning. I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should continue, if I should leave, what was going on. And I was crying. And all of a sudden, I was passing a Catholic church. And for some reason, I immediately pulled into the parking lot of the church. And I really didn't know what I was doing there. But I sat there wondering what I was doing. And something struck me that said, if I go inside, something important will happen. But I was really fearful at that time. The people at the church I knew were friendly because they all came and ate at a restaurant that we had built and ran. And so, but there was no real reason for me to be here and to go inside. But I surrendered after a moment, my reluctance and my draw to really leave immediately. So I went inside and I sat into the chapel and I sat down, and there wasn't anybody there. And as I sat there, I closed my eyes and I was asking inside very deeply, what should I do? This is a very chaotic time. I don't know how to proceed. And I opened my eyes, and there was a very bright white light that filled the room. And at the same moment, a voice, a male voice that I did not recognize, said, yes, it's all right to continue the path. And so after a moment, I left, and then I didn't look back. I knew what my path was going to be. Now, go a certain number of years later, when I was in my 50s, and I was at a point in my life when I really was going to have to make some very important decisions. I was struggling with my 26-year-old marriage. I was struggling with very deeply ingrained psychological and emotional problems, issues. And these were made worse by the fact that I was pursuing a doctoral PhD program at a university, a very intense, pressuring program in educational psychology. And even though I had been doing my inner work based on Rudy's work, and now based on Swamiji's work, even though I'd been doing that every day, it wasn't enough. I did not know how to approach those problems. There were too intense and too many of them. My academic mentor suggested I see a therapist. And so I went to a nationally prominent Jungian psychologist. And he would not take me on as a patient because he said, I don't dream and I live my fantasies, whereas most people just wish them. So what was I supposed to do? Again, my mentor invited me to her home out in the country. And I went out there, and at around midnight, I went out and I sat on a hill. And I closed my eyes and I started asking inside for help. And it was when I felt the warmth of the sun the next morning that I got up, left, and went back home. And when I went home, I went to my altar. And on my altar, I had 3 photographs, one of Rudy, one of his teacher, Bhagavan Nityananda, and one of Rudy's teachers, the Shankaracharya of Puri. Now, you must know that back in the days, we had photographs of our teachers. They were full face on. They were considered teaching photographs. And when we meditated, we would sit in front of these photographs and we would work and do our meditation. And so I sat down to do that. And I always worked with Rudy. But all of a sudden, I was drawn to the Shankaracharya photograph. And it frightened me because I had never experienced that. I had his photo because he had been one of Rudy's teachers, and I wanted to show respect. But I finally went beyond my fear and my anxiety because something said, work with him. And that's what I needed to do at this time. And so I did. And so for the next 2 hours, and then after that, for the next few months, I worked with him. And I really received the information, the strength, confidence, and the support to face the problems that were in front of me. And I could go on with my life. What we're learning today on our journey, our spiritual journey, is to become responsible for our lives, and that includes making decisions. Over time, we develop and understanding of some of these processes and the nature of what we go through at these times. And the two examples I just gave suggest a process, a very natural one, that I call acknowledging the spark of recognition when you're at a crossroad in your life. Becoming aware, having consciousness of this process, I believe can add to our ability to surrender in ourselves and to transform what are our blocks and hindrances in our psychic systems into the flow of higher creative energy. And that reestablishes the balance in our psychic and emotional systems. And that is indeed our spiritual heritage. When we come to these crossroads and we face issues, whether they are emotional, psychological, psychic, spiritual, maybe even moral or ethical, we have choices to make. And many times at these crossroads, we have a spark of recognition. And that spark tells us, it gives us a clue as far as a direction. Either something that is the most important thing at the time or further in our lives. And we need to pay attention to these. This spark of recognition comes from a very deep place within us. It's intuitive, visceral, and it's innate. And it belongs to the deepest parts of our being. And it is divine. And when we become aware of the spark, sometimes it's true that we reject its energy. We reject its message. We might say, oh no, this really didn't happen. Or we ignore its significance. But in actuality, we've recognized the spark, and that will stay with us no matter what our choices are. We will remember, and it'll stay. And this has certainly happened throughout my life. And there are many times when the problems I've had are because I have either rejected or ignored the spark of recognition. But this is where surrender can come. No matter the difficulty facing us to make a decision, we could become quiet, we can close our eyes, open our hearts, and we can ask deeply to grow. If we're aware of this spark of recognition, we can acknowledge it to ourselves and use it. And through surrender in this instance, as with all other instances, we can find the joy and the truth that within ourselves we have this boundless capacity to change and grow, which we really need to be reminded of all the time. In our spiritual path, rising energy practice, under the guidance of Acharya Brahmananda and Acharya Devadas, we're given even more profound and essential tools to help us go into the deepest parts of us, make decisions in times of crisis or in the natural course of our daily living. We're learning to access the Akashic field. We learn to access parts of our psyche of the past that influence us today. And we learn to access levels of our bodies that are alive with the flow of energy and connect us into the deepest levels of our total being. My growth, it's been essential to work with trauma beings and devastated. At this point in my life, they grew and inspire me to discover who I really am and to give me tools to make use of those discoveries. They teach me how to ask in my heart and mind to open to the beauty and the wonder and the promise that the universe has to offer us. I can be happy, which turns into pure bliss from time to time, and have the compassion and wisdom, and to love and be loved without judgment by others and myself. And that is such a good thing. I work to grow as a human being, not accepting my limiting ego identity and the life patterns placed on me, but rather to live the extraordinary life that I deserve. It was through a spark of recognition that I chose Swamiji as a teacher. And I am, for that, very grateful to the divine within and to the divine without. Thank you.